Hi, this is Moo. I see some videos on YouTube about fitting ships in Eve for specific purposes, whether it's mission running, mostly for PvP. Some of them are quite good, like Johnny Pugh's series on his exploration ships, and he goes through, explains the fitting, and tells you why you do certain things, which might be counterintuitive. Some are just, here's my fit, and then they run down the list of modules. And some are literally 10 seconds of a guy mousing around a fitting screen with no commentary whatsoever. I wanted to do something on how you figure out a fit for yourself, and I may do that at some point. But for now, I just wanted to show you a fitting experiment I did last night that did not work out for me, and just run you through my thought processes, since that's mostly the same thing. The idea that I had was to take the budget bearer idea of a tier 3 battlecruiser and a cheap logistics ship, in my case, as you probably know, Talos and a Scythe, and just scale it up to a relatively cheap battleship with short-range, high DPS guns. Now, I have done this in the past, and I have done quite well with it, but that was in pre-Odyssey anomalies and not in missions, and the two are very different. Now, for this to work, I figured the primary ship would be taking more of a beating, so I needed something that could dish out a lot of close-range DPS and not melt under incoming fire. And since I'm just scaling up from the original budget bearer, I figured the natural alternative is a shield Megathron and a Scythe. The basic upsides that I was looking for were more DPS and really good tracking to kill everything at close range faster than I could with the railgun budget bearer. Now, with a close range setup, I'd also have the benefit of the drones not having to go as far. And that's pretty important when you get up to battleship base that can hold ogres. If you've seen any of the budget bearer stuff or you've tried it yourself, you know that when you're fighting around 45 to 50 kilometers, your drone travel time is actually pretty significant. Now, as a minor benefit of having a battleship with an afterburner, I would be out of range less often with the logistics ship, which in theory means that I wouldn't have to look at that second screen as often, because I'm wondering whether or not my cap transfer turned off or whether I'm getting the benefit of the remote tracking computers. I'm lazy. Now, the obvious problems with this kind of setup would be in a short-range boat, you have to travel a little bit more, which wastes some of your damage over time. That's because you don't want to really fight in fall off. You want to fight at your optimal, which is around, for large blasters, maybe 4 to 5 kilometers, using antimatter. Now, I wanted to see whether or not the NPCs traveling toward me would compensate for this, because if you'll notice in the railgun videos, most of the time you're moving away from your enemies and not towards them. Being close range also means higher incoming damage, which could be a problem. And a battleship has a much bigger signature than a battlecruiser, which also means more incoming damage from, say, cruise missiles and battleship-sized guns. And this means that the alt boat would be healing more, which I think increases NPC hate towards them, which means that they would have to deal with more incoming fire. One of the benefits of the battlecruiser and Scythe setup is that with a smaller signature and an afterburner, you can move around just fine and ignore a lot of the incoming battleship fire. The signature is actually a pretty big part of your tank. And, of course, come on, shield Megathrons are just plain stupid. So this is the first Megathron fit that I was playing with in this experiment. It's very simple: damage, 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 damage. 7 neutron blaster can 2s in the highs with standard antimatter load. Tech 2 afterburner because, I want to avoid the SIG bloom as much as I can, but every bit of speed counts in a blaster boat. Shield extender for a little bit of buffer, 2 hardeners. In the lows, the Megathron has a lot of lows, so I dropped in 4 mag stabs, because 5 is just ridiculous. 1 tracking enhancer, since I'm going to be getting a hull bonus and remote tracking computers as well. 2 drone damage amplifiers, which I think are useful since I'm using a high damage set with ogres, hammerheads, and a hobgoblin, and the damage control. And in this case, if I was fighting Garistas, and I wanted to have a sensor backup array, I would drop a mag stab and not the damage control. First of all, because it's a Gallente ship. It has a lot of hull. You want that margin of safety if things go wrong. And second, because I still don't trust this experiment not to just explode in my face. For the rigs, I used one collision accelerator and 2 metastasis adjusters because I want more tracking side to side since I don't have a web. And I want to be able to hit whatever I'm pointed at my fall-off range or my optimal. The scythe is just about the same as what I'm using for the standard budget bear. I changed it up a little bit. I changed out the rigs from resist rigs to purgers, and the reason is because the resist rigs are super cheap, but I found that they were only situationally useful. So naturally, as you would change resistances when you're moving from rat type to rat type, they become more or less useful. By contrast, the purgers are always useful. And the reason is that I found when your incoming damage switches between your DPS boat and your logistics boat, as long as your logistics boat doesn't get below your peak recharge, which is around 30%, the purgers are far more useful because they rebuild that buffer a lot faster before you start taking aggression again. So this is my first failed experiment. I decided, let's take it out, see how it does. So I took it into a simple Guristas mission, which means that I am subbing out sensor backup arrays to counter jams. Now, we come in at certain ranges, means I've got to travel a little bit. It gives me plenty of time to set up my drones. Then I take one shot, I think, at this guy just to set the drones on him, and then I get just kind of bored with it, so continue taking shots. The travel time doesn't bother me that much because I'm actually a little bit surprised as to how well I'm doing, but what does bother me is the scan resolution, and this is a problem on battleships compared to battlecruisers. I'm much slower to lock anything, especially those frigates, which are what I want to kill right away. This is also a problem because it doesn't let me react more quickly to things going on. Now, luckily, I did get my locks off as soon as I saw that scramble go off, and I'm pretty surprised as to how well I'm killing these frigates at what I think are relatively close ranges. So I think, hey, this fit's not so bad. It can work just fine. Now, you see that the aggression is shifting. First, they attack some of my drones, especially the larger hammerheads and ogres, so I got to recall them. That's kind of a pain in the neck. And then they switch aggression over to my logistics boat. Now, in the past, this has never been a problem because as long as you have a kinetic hardener, you can take Guristas missiles pretty much all day. The real problem here is that because I'm so close, their guns are hitting, and their guns are thermal and kinetic. So possibly an adaptive invul might have been better on the alt boat here, but it doesn't matter. I'm so close that my low signature and speed is having less of an effect. They're fighting in their optimals. I don't want to be there. I'm taking way too much damage, and it actually takes me a while to notice. So I'm actually really close to losing my alt boat, which doesn't bother me a lot, except that it would be really embarrassing. So now I have to leave. And leaving missions is a big pain in the ass. Fortunately, nobody has me pointed on the field, so I can just get out. In fact, they're webbing me, which helps me. So this experiment was a failure. So let's see what happened here. Some of the problems I ran into and described, there's not a lot I can do about it without compromising the fit even more. I can drop in signal amplifiers and mag stabs if I want better scan resolution. Instead of using the high damage set, I can switch to 5 hammers and 5 hobs and switch them out depending on whether or not I have to target a frigate. But the real problem is that my alt boat is way too vulnerable at close range. So the first modification I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a tracking computer, remote tracking computer for a second hardener, which really doesn't make me happy because I just love tracking computers in these two boat setups. I'm also going to switch out the script in the tracking computer for a tracking speed script, since I've decided that my optimal is so bad that it barely matters. What I really want is more damage at higher transversal. So now I head out, and the second experiment is against what I think is a relatively simple mission against Sanche's Nation. And Sanche's Nation tends to start at long range, and this is where it really hits me. My battleship is way too slow. Look how far I have to travel just to get into even any kind of a fall-off solution for any of my guns. It's ridiculous. I'm heading way out there. It's driving me bananas, and once I finally do get even to, like, say 40 kilometers or so, I start firing. But the problem is now I'm fighting in fall off, and you might, if you come from an autocannon background, you think, well, no big deal, you fight in fall off all the time anyway. That's true for autocannons, although you still suffer damage loss. It's just that autocannons have really good fall off characteristics. If I'm fighting in fall off using blasters all the time, then my paper DPS doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I might be getting over 1,000 with my guns in PIFA or EFT, but it just doesn't matter, because realistically I'm doing closer to 400 or so, and my drones are still traveling a long way, and then I have to recall them as soon as they get targeted. So I was better off really using the railguns, unless I solve this problem of how do I get in there a lot faster. And now the groups are kind of far away, so I have to move again, traveling over here, and my scan res is driving me crazy again as I'm trying to target these frigates. Once I do get in a range, the damage is pretty good, but I really don't see... I'm still not really seeing an upside to this. The other thing that I'm noticing is that my capacitor is draining really fast, and this... I should have expected this, because actually the Talos has a 50% capacitor use bonus on large hybrid turrets, and I didn't take that into account. So I still have a cap transfer array, but it's having less of an effect. And now I run into a really annoying problem, which is that because I have to get into like 4 to 5 kilometers, I'm now bouncing off of buildings. I have to manually pilot around buildings, and this is really super annoying. I just want to be out of here at this point, especially since I'm on an afterburner. And I'm not really moving that fast. But, I'll fight through it. And I think eventually I just get sick of trying to run around this building, set my drones on this guy, this last guy, and then I head for another group. Because this is just awful. I mean, I'm bouncing off of buildings, which is embarrassing enough. I'm wasting a lot of time trying to steer around buildings in order to get to the target that I want to hit. Whereas, before, if I had railguns, I would never be in this situation. So in my mind, I think I'm already committed to switching this fit out for a micro warp drive. And in my mind, I'm also calculating out, well, the disadvantages that come with a micro warp drive. Obviously, my cap problem is going to become bigger, since I'll be consuming more cap, and my capacitor will shrink just by having the module equipped. My signature radius is going to go bananas every time I use it. And overall, it's just not a good deal. You see here, I'm still bouncing off this damn building. This is ridiculous. Yeah, eventually I give up. I'm going to head for this other group and just wait for the drones. And fortunately, ogres do a lot of damage. So this group and my alt boats, Hammerheads and Hobgoblins, should chew that guy up pretty quickly. And actually, they do a pretty good job. You can see right there, their damage is not insignificant. Now, I also run into a problem here which I hadn't anticipated, because it's just a Megathron and it's just a scythe, and their fittings are cheap. They're not blinged out. It's not like I'm flying a Vindicator or anything. But one thing that you have to be aware of when you're running missions in HiSec, whether you want this because you're baiting or you don't, is that you will get attention. In any battleship attracts more attention than a battlecruiser. So, yep, here comes a friendly visitor. This guy, Dr. Dreddy, I've seen him around Tinto once in a while when I've been there, and, people bitching at him and local and such. I remember a long time ago there was a player named Amber Theta Waves who actually did kill a lot of HiSec mission runners, which I thought was really, really hilarious. Dr. Dreddy seems to just kill mobile tractor units and lose expensive ships. But it doesn't matter, because I don't have a point, and I can't really deal with him, so, I let him take his one crappy bounty. I'm actually happy, because I want to be done with his mission, and then I get the hell out of there. So I consider this run to also be a failure. Let's see what went wrong there. What basically went wrong is that I am really, really slow. And the paper DPS does not matter at all when you cannot get into optimal. On the Budget Bear Talos, it's really easy to get into optimal because it's between 45 and 50 kilometers, and you move really, really fast with just an afterburner. And this keeps your signature low, as I mentioned before, which helps you tank better, and you're far away, which keeps everyone happy. It looks like the only solution I have is to drop an MWD onto the Megathron, which just barely fits fine. And yeah, I know that micro-warp drives are standard on battleships, but if you don't understand that quote, you need to go watch Clear Skies. Like now. So this is our third and final test of this setup, because by this point I was getting a little bit sick of it already. I've dropped in the micro-warp drive, as you can see. And this is a Sanchez mission that is so simple that it barely even counts as a test. The only thing that I'm really getting out of this is seeing how much of a cap problem I suffer from, and can I get into range fast enough on the enemy. Now, I am getting into range a lot faster, and as soon as I get into my fall-off or like some kind of reasonable range, I am hitting them really hard. My tracking is good. The problem is that I've already gotten out of range of my alt boat, so I'm not getting the benefit of my one remaining tracking computer or my cap transfer, which kind of obviates the whole point of this thing. I mean, if all I was really worried about was reps, a battleship can rep itself just fine through most of this with just a slight hit to DPS. So I am going to consider this experiment a failure, but it's important that you keep experimenting and playing with the fits as you go along, because that's kind of what theory crafting really is. You come up with a theory, draw it up in Python or EFT, seeing how it looks on paper, then based on your own experience, you can know what some of the practical drawbacks are, and then you go out and experiment and find out what works, what doesn't work, can you fix it, what are the drawbacks of those fixes, and then can you live with the result. For instance, yeah, I could overcome part of the range problem with this setup by using null ammo, but that's more expensive, and generally the income on missions is so poor that I do not like using T2 ammo unless it's Scorch. I could also maybe overcome this even more by using null ammo and a Roke, but then I give up some of the damage and I give up the tracking bonus, and it's still I still run into more of those problems, plus I'm even slower. So the upshot of this experiment is that I have a spare Megathron. Thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of this that you could use yourself, and I'll see you next time.